Hey there. So I had a bit of a breakthrough just now. So I'm struggling to get through Dr. Johnson's poem Irene. Very difficult for me to read. So I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, and it might as well be in another language, and I just cannot get it. So I decided this morning to read, or to try to study a little bit about the poem, to understand its history, what it was based on, so that I could get the context. And it helped a lot. So I did some reading. I understand what Johnson was basing it on. It's basically based on what do you call it? A Muslim king's conquest of Constantinople, and his taking a Greek Christian woman captive. Her name is Irene, and then it's the story of her challenge of accepting Islam, and giving up her faith to become queen, or maintaining her faith and becoming essentially a martyr. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now I understand the story. Now I understand the players, and the players are his visors, visitors, whatever they're called, his various officials in the court intrigue. But what was most interesting to me was I now understand how it was written. This is a poem, and it's very difficult to read. I mean, I can't even open the book. The book's 200 years old, so I have to be very careful with it. But I mean, just listen to this. It's really hard to read. So this is scene 4. This is Irene, asphasia, some attendants. It says, if yet this shining pomp, this is asphasia, her friend talking, Irene's friend. If yet this shining pomp, these sudden honors, swell not thy soul beyond advice or friendship, nor yet inspire for the follies of a queen, or tune thine ear to soothing adulation. Suspend a while the privilege of power, to hear the voice of truth, dismiss thy train, shake off the encumbrance of state a moment, and lay the towering sultriness aside. Now, okay, that's not so bad. That's better than most of the couplets, I guess, that I've been. So, but the part that I got was the thing I was studying that I understand now. Is now I understand what's called blank verse. I didn't know what blank verse was before. Verses, and it's a type of poetry. It turns out that like 3/4 of all English poetry is written in blank verse. It's how Shakespeare wrote as well. And my wife just sent me a message. She's laughing at an image I sent her. It turns out that this is written that way. Now, the reason that I'm having the trouble is that the difference is that it's metered but unrhymed verse. Metered and rhymed verse would be a verse that would have where every other line would rhyme, and which kind of gives you then, when they're rhyming, it kind of gives you a measure, a cadence, right? You can kind of get things. It also creates, hey dogs, it also creates kind of a punctuation as well. Unmetered, metered yet unrhyming, a blank verse, though, doesn't do that. And what it does is it frees the author to create very elaborate constructs of ideas. Paragraphs of verse that are practically unconstrained by either by punctuation, or rhyme or punctuation. What it does is it forces the readers to engage their mind to try to unravel this. Probably the most famous English and earliest English use of this was John Milton's Paradise Lost, which John Milton specifically set out to do that. He wanted to break the English language free from the chains of a metered rhyme, so that we would be, because he said, follow the Greek tradition. I think of the Roman tradition as well. I'm thinking of some of the great epics of those cultures, and he did with Paradise Lost. Set the stage, broke us free from those fetters. Then we witness Shakespeare and also Johnson in his poem Irene, which interestingly was one of his greatest successes and failures. He struggled with it, starting to write the poem when he was 17 years old, still a country bumpkin, working for his father in the countryside, taking the unfinished poem at last to London, where he sought to have it published. It's an awful poem. It's an awful play, I should say. It's a great poem, I think. but it's an awful play because Johnson knew nothing about stagecraft. It's basically having characters march out onto the stage and doing what Johnson does best, which is just speaking, right? So imagine players marching on stage. There's no stage direction. It's just march off, talk for 5 minutes, turn around, march back off, and then more characters march on. So he had no idea this 17, 18, 19-year-old young man, writing his first play, which eventually his friend Garrett, who he was a pupil of Johnson's at one point, eventually became the owner or the manager of the Drury Lane Theater, and promised to have and got Irene published, which actually earned Johnson a lot of money, because the way that worked on that is after 3 nights on the third night of production in the 18th century, the author would get after expenses, would get all of the money, and he made a lot of money for that. Yet it was never produced again until I think 1999 was the full production again. And Johnson regarded the play as one of his greatest failures. He could basically, because it was unplayable, right? I mean, even though Johnson became a famous man, the writing's good, hard to follow, but it's very good, but very almost unplayable based on the way that it was produced. And Johnson, there's anecdotes of Johnson showing up wearing, he was known for his lack of any sense or taste, showing up for the productions in a rather gaudy outfit, because he thought that's how you're supposed to, the authors are supposed to appear. He'd sit right up there in the front, wearing his flamboyant outfit, thinking that's how authors are supposed to appear. And apparently he had some interesting encounters in the green room, so backstage as well. Anyway, so it was a failure because it couldn't get produced, but it was a success because it made him a lot of money, especially early on at an early stage. So I'm attempting to read it now. It's a difficult read, maybe one of the most difficult things I've ever read, and it occupies most of this whole book. I'm gonna get through it, and now that I understand the story better, now that I'm very excited. Can you feel it? Now that I understand blank verse, which is what Johnson is using here, I'm really excited. I almost want to go back and start reading it over again because I want to unravel. Because Johnson is brilliant with his words. He's brilliant with his ideas. I would love to see how this young 17, 18, 19-year-old genius unfolded the story of Irene, using this method that unleashed him from the binds of rhyme and punctuation and convention in so many ways. So exciting. Anyway, that's my little summary so far of Irene. A worthwhile read, if anything, for the broadening of horizons. Take care.